Hey everyone, this is Nojo from Thranda Design. Today we're taking a look at the upcoming expansion pack of the PC-6, specifically looking at the Amphibian version. So this plane has a set of Whip-Air 6100 floats with retractable landing gear, free-castering nose wheels, and, if I spin around to the back of the plane here, water rudders. And so these are how we steer on the water. So there are a couple specific things we're going to look at today. We'll look at kind of the operation, how do we fly the plane and how do we taxi it, as well as some things in the cockpit. So the first thing in the cockpit we notice is the landing gear panel. So this is part of the dynamic instruments panel, dynamic instrument system, and it's only visible when the amphibian is loaded. It's instrument number 52. So if I scoot ahead to 52, then it can be moved around just like any other instrument manually as desired. And the location of the panel will be different in different panel presets, just kind of how the spacing worked out. So on this panel we have a gear handle to retract or extend the gear. We have some lights. These are 4 blue lights indicating the gear is up for water landing, 1 red light indicating the pump is on, so the gear is in transit, and then 4 green lights indicating the gear is down and locked. So this is 4 blue for water landing, 4 green for runway landing. Additionally, we have a dimmer switch. When it's up, it dims the lights for nighttime. Then we also have gear advisory light. So this is kind of cool. We'll see this in action in just a second, but the gear advisory system is pretty cool. It's got a laser that shines from the bottom of the wing down, and the system looks at the reflection from that laser light to determine whether we're over water or not. And then the gear advisory system will give us a warning if the landing gear is in the wrong position for the surface that we're flying over. So for example, if we had the gear down over water, it would warn us. And it warns us by illuminating the gear advisory light, and then it also gives us an audible check gear warning. So we'll see that in just a sec. So for the next part is the water rudder. If I go back outside, these guys are the back of the floats. So these are how we steer the aircraft on the water, and they should be retracted for all cases except if we're taxiing slowly on the water. So to retract them, there are 3 main ways. We have the miscellaneous page, and you'll have to forgive us, this is a work in progress currently, but this button, you can extend and retract the water rudders that way. You can also assign a keyboard shortcut to X-Plane's default water rudder toggle commands. And then also in the cockpit, we have a handle in the 3D cockpit here, or actually this works better if I go over here, this would extend and forward would retract. So those are the 3 ways to move those water rudders. So now we're going to talk a little bit before we get moving about ground handling, because we no longer have a steerable tail wheel in the amphibian version. All steering is done with differential braking. So if you have a joystick and no external hardware pedals, then X-Plane will automatically apply some braking once you get past a certain amount of rudder deflection. So you can see that in action. There's a little bit of a delay before the plane starts turning. If you do have hardware pedals, then you can just directly assign an axis to the left and right brakes. So now we're going to take a quick look at takeoff. We'll see the gear advisory system in action, and then we'll do a landing here on Lake Washington just off the end of the runway. So just like with the wheeled PC-6, takeoff is going to be flaps to the takeoff position, full right rudder trim, lights on, and ignition on. We'll add takeoff power. Now for the first part of the takeoff, we're probably going to have to hold right rudder and some right brake even, until we get going fast enough that the rudder can become aerodynamically effective. So there, power is set. I'm just holding a little bit of back pressure, and probably right about 50 knots, the plane should lift off. Yeah, there it goes. All right, I'm going to retract the gear, and we're going to get set up for our landing here. And we'll do kind of a low flight over the runway, so we trigger that gear advisory system. So for landing, it's going to be full flaps. We'll be looking at about 55 to 60 knots, depending on the aircraft weight. We're pretty light today, so I'm expecting about 55, maybe a little lower. So let's bring up the volume so we can hear that gear advisory system.
Check gear. Check gear.
There, so we could hear it saying check gear, and the light came on. Whoops, let's not actually land on the ground. And as soon as we come over the water, that gear advisory system will turn off. So now, for landing, setting usually just about 12 psi on the torque, and full flaps, we're going to let the plane slow down and come up to a pitch attitude right about like that, and decrease a little power. We're just going to kind of hold this until we touch down. So there we go, we're on the water. Now I'm increasing back stick, try to keep that nose up, and smoothly pulling the power back, and back into beta. So we'll come off the step, off the plane, and here we go, we landed. Now initially we have very little directional control, especially in beta, because there's the water rudders are retracted and there's no propeller prop wash coming over the tail. But if we extend the water rudders, we can see we actually get quite a bit of directional control there. So now the final part for this segment, we're going to shut the engine down. We'll retract the flaps, lights off. Now one consideration is when we're shutting down on the wheeled PC-6, we'll feather the propeller, and that ends up giving, it helps the propeller slow down quickly, but it gives a big burst of thrust. Now that's fine on the ground because we have brakes, but on the water, we don't have brakes. So if we're trying to do some delicate docking operation, we don't want a big burst of thrust to scoot us forward. So instead we make use of what's called the pitch latch system, or the propeller start locks, which holds the blades in a flat pitch. So we're going to go radio master off, generator off, basically shut down the plane. Once we're ready, we'll pull the guard and condition lever to cut off. And because we're not feathering the propeller, it's actually going to take the prop quite a while to spool down. But once the prop is below about 800 RPM, we can briefly engage reverse, and that's going to allow those start locks to engage, and that will hold the blades in their flat position. Because normally when we lose oil pressure, the blades will automatically feather on their own, which we don't want. So here we are below 800. I'm just going to pull this power lever back into reverse briefly, and just back out to idle. And that's all there is to it. That'll engage those start locks. And as we shut down, the prop will stay in a flat position. So I'll skip ahead real quick. We can see that as it spools down. So here you can see as the propeller spools down, the blades are staying in a nice flat position. No thrust. And that'll also help not just for shutdown, but also for starting up off the dock. We don't want to get a big burst of thrust as the propeller unfeathers either. Okay, I've moved us over here to Lake Union now. We've just landed, we still have the water rudders extended, and we're going to go taxi over to the Kenmore Air seaplane dock, which is way over here. Now, that would take a while at, taxiing at 5 knots or so. So what we're going to do is something called a step taxi. This is sort of in between taking off and taxiing. So the first step, we're going to retract the water rudder, and I'm holding basically full right rudder, I'm holding full back stick, and we're going to increase the power up toward takeoff power, not quite, but just enough that we can get up on the step. So there we are. Now I'm going to relax that back pressure, let the nose come down. I'm going to decrease our power and hold us just about here at 35 knots or so. We can gently steer the aircraft using the rudder, and you can see this is just a much easier way to get around quickly. Here we are planing across the water. So now that we're close, we're ready to slow down. We're going to hold full back stick and gently pull that power back into beta again. Whop. There it goes. And since we want to control, we can extend those water rudders again. And there we are. So my plan is I'm going to swing us around here and get us docked along this dock here. That's our goal. Alright, so as we come in here, I'm going to keep us nice and slow using beta as needed. And we're going to just swing ourselves right next to the dock. And we're going to use a new feature called docking hold. So we'll get ready to shut down, turning off systems, turning off the battery. So this docking hold basically simulates somebody grabbing the docking lines of the plane and holding it in place, which is pretty cool. So as we get closer, we've got plenty of speed now. I'm going to shut down the engine. And just like before, we're going to engage those start locks. Once the RPM drops below about 800, and I promise I'll try not to run over these people. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to try to bring us nice and parallel to the dock. There we go, just about like that, and we're going to engage docking hold. And that brings the plane to a stop, and so we're still kind of bobbing up and down here. And as soon as I engaged it, I was on the MISC page, it switches over to the slew page. So if I go to the outside view, we can see this gives us some extra controls. We can adjust our heading, and we can scoot ourselves around using this directional pad here. So that way we can kind of fine-tune our position on the dock, and it will hold us stationary right there. So for our final segment, we're going to take a look at undocking, engine start, and takeoff. So to get ready for engine start, battery on, beacon on, fuel pump on, good fuel pressure, prop clear, starter engage, got NG rising, and we have oil pressure rising, 12% no fuel flow, ignition on, and stabilized, introduce fuel. And at this point, our docking hand will let go of the ropes, let us float freely. So now remember, at this point, our start locks are still engaged, so we're not going to have a lot of direct control over the thrust yet. So the engine start is successful. Do that. And I'm going to bump up the power just a little bit, get that prop RPM up above 800. And we'll go into reverse for just a second. And there. Now we have a properly functioning propeller. And we can taxi and use beta as normal. So I'm going to get us lined up here. Normally we'd be taking off and landing directly into the wind. In this case we have a calm day, so I'm just going to point us in this direction. And for takeoff, just like every other takeoff in the PC-6 pretty much, we'll go flaps to takeoff position, full right rudder trim, and lights on, strobes, ignition and boost pump and ignition, and here we go. So I'm going to retract the water rudder. Going to hold full aft stick, smoothly increase power up to takeoff, and use rudder to keep that nose pointed where we want it. So there's 45. So the nose comes up, and it'll drop on its own a little. I'm going to relax that back pressure, and we're just going to hold this pitch attitude right here. Whoops, porpoising a little bit. Until the plane lifts off on its own. There we go. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the Amphibian in our upcoming expansion pack. We're really looking forward to getting it out there for you so you can all take a look at it too. And I hope you join me on the next video. See you later. Meow. I know. I know, you're so meowy. Okay, so that's set. Good. Okay, let me try that again. Hey, Bella. Okay, are you meowing?